US President Donald Trump says he gave Iran a 60-day ultimatum to agree to a nuclear deal. That was before Israel's attacks. But he says Tehran now has a second chance. On his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump posted that Iran should make a deal, otherwise the next already planned attacks would be more brutal. US media is reporting that Trump was informed by Israel before the strikes happened. And we can get more from DW's Janelle Dumalaon, who is in Washington, D.C. So, Janelle, Trump was pushing Israel not to attack Iran, apparently. Why was he initially opposed to these attacks?
Yeah, he was very clear on that, at least publicly. He said ahead of these attacks that he was telling Israel not to go into Iran because that would, quote, blow it. It being, of course, the diplomatic efforts to reach a nuclear deal with Iran. So he was essentially saying that those strikes could scuttle the chances of reaching that nuclear deal. He also warned against the possibility of a wider regional conflict. He was saying that perhaps the effects of this strike could expand just beyond the strike. And of course, that would have implications for the tens of thousands of U.S. troops that are stationed in the region. And indeed, we have seen that the messaging coming out of the U.S. government since these strikes have happened have concentrated on telling Iran not to harm U.S. personnel or interests in the region. However, if that does end up happening, it's hard to see how the U.S. would then not be entangled in this conflict. And we do know that avoiding foreign entanglement was a key policy priority for this government. As such, we have now arrived at a very complex situation for the U.S. government to be in.
And where does this leave relations between Israel and the U.S.?
That's hard to say at the moment without knowing exactly how hard the U.S. tried to dissuade Israel from launching this attack beyond just telling them not to do it. There was also a moment where Trump suggested that the strikes could even be helpful, suggesting that these strikes could perhaps force Iran to go to the negotiating table. But of course, there is a balance to be struck here between Washington saying that it wants to prioritize diplomacy, at the same time preparing to defend Israel's security against Iranian retaliation. And this is all obviously unfolding at a time where Trump and Netanyahu have seen their relations falter somewhat. The two men, of course, are expected to be having a call later on, and you can expect that will be a very closely monitored call indeed.
What reactions are you seeing in the U.S. to this escalation in the Middle East?
Well, I have already talked a bit about how Trump has responded to these strikes, but of course that reaction is not uniform across Washington. Perhaps unsurprisingly, those reactions have fallen along party lines. So you have the likes of Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson. In a social media post, he wrote, "Israel is right and has a right to defend itself." So that's a sentiment that has been widely reflected, at least among Trump's allies in government. But then you have the other side. You have Democrats warning of increasing dangers in the region, the likes of Senator Chris Murphy saying this is a disaster of Trump and Netanyahu's own making, and now the region risks spiraling towards a new deadly conflict. So that was in a statement he released. So it's clear that all sides understand the gravity of the situation, even if the responses have not been the same across the board.
If we could just talk about the talks that were happening between Iran and the U.S. on the status of Iran's nuclear program, would you say that these attacks signal an end to any further negotiations?
You know, that is unclear. Obviously, you know, the strikes sort of reduce the U.S.'s negotiating room here. There is even some reporting to suggest that some in Iran are seeing these talks as a sort of smokescreen to give Israel the element of a surprise, because, of course, when they did go into Iran, that was with U.S. knowledge. And as such, that would make the U.S. a difficult party to trust in any ongoing negotiations. But the U.S. has reiterated its willingness to prioritize diplomacy. But then we come back to that split split between wanting these talks to continue, but also vowing to help Israel defend itself if Iran retaliates. So that's a very difficult situation, a very difficult balance to strike, and that makes the future health of these negotiations quite difficult to predict.
DW's Janelle Dumalaon reporting from Washington, D.C. Janelle, thank you. And we're joined now by our Brussels correspondent, Mhundwa. Christine, tell us about the EU's official reaction to Israel's strikes on Iran.
Well, Anya, there are calls for restraint here in Brussels. Officials, in all of their statements, really voicing their alarm over the developments in the Middle East. The Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, began her statement by saying that she was deeply alarmed by the events that are happening. She's asked all parties to de-escalate and to refrain from retaliation. We know that the EU's chief diplomat, Kaja Kallas, has been in contact with her Israeli counterpart, the Israeli foreign minister. We also understand that Brussels has an open line to Tehran, though on a different channel. Now, the European Union has also not issued evacuation orders for its staff in the region, but an official did confirm earlier that measures had been taken to increase the security protocols for staff in the region. At a midday briefing earlier this afternoon in Brussels, an EU spokesperson was pressed on the question of whether or not the European Union had a position on if Israel had violated international law, as is being alleged by some neighbours in the region. The spokesman would not be drawn into that, reiterating that it is the European Union's desire to perhaps get involved in terms of finding a diplomatic solution to de-escalate the situation in the Middle East.
So, Christine, that's the official EU reaction. I mean, are there any other reactions? Are we hearing anything else, for example, from the individual member states?
Absolutely. We know that the leaders of France, Germany and the United Kingdom have held a call. They have said that they will remain in close contact. We also now have received confirmation that the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz was among the first leaders to be briefed about Israel's strikes on Tehran. We understand that the Israeli Prime Minister phoned the German Chancellor shortly after those attacks began. We also know that the French president has been making phone calls. He's spoken to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the Jordanian King. He's spoken to the President of the United Arab Emirates, as well as the Emir of Qatar. The various capitals of the EU member states have released statements. They all take a very similar tone. They initially start by expressing what is some kind of alarm to the events that are happening. They're calling for the de-escalation, fears of how this could destabilize the region. Then there is also the note about, acknowledging Israel having the right to defend itself. I think it was a Czech foreign minister that went as far as to saying that, Israel's actions here were reasonable given the threat that the country faces. And then, of course, there is the overall line that says Iran should not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. So no condemnation for Israel, so to say, coming out of virtually any member state here, but all calling for de-escalation and for restraint by both sides as this conflict ratchets on.
DW's Christine Mhundwa in Brussels. Christine, thank you. Reactions are now coming in from the German government. Here's what the German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul said while on his trip to Egypt.
At the moment, Iran is attacking Israel with hundreds of drones. There are reports of the first casualties. These developments are more than worrying. We strongly condemn the indiscriminate Iranian attack on Israeli territory.
Auf israelisches Staatsgebiet verurteilen wir auf das Schärfste.
We urge all sides to refrain from steps that could lead to further escalation and jeopardise the security of the entire region.
Our political correspondent Giullia Saudelli is travelling with the German Foreign Minister, and she joins us now from Cairo. Giullia, tell us more about what the German Foreign Minister has been saying.
Yes, well, as we've heard, he's expressed his worry for a situation that he sees as critical. He has said he has called on both parties to avoid an escalation which could really pose a risk for stability in the entire region. But these attacks come at a particular time for the German foreign minister. We are in Egypt right now, and he is on a trip that is meant to take him also to other countries in the region, including Lebanon, Jordan, and Israel on Sunday. And now his travel plans have been disrupted. It is unclear how this will continue. We've heard from the minister himself that it is unlikely that we will be able to travel to Jordan or even to Israel at the weekend, given also the security situation implied in flying around the region as these attacks are happening. And we've also heard from Foreign Minister Vadeful that he was informed shortly after the attacks began by the Israeli foreign minister that these attacks were happening. He said he was one of the first few people to be informed of this, and that he then was directly in touch with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who was then called by Benjamin Netanyahu. So Germany, apparently one of the Israeli partners to be among the first to be informed about this attack right after it began.
Let's talk about this balance that Germany has to strike here, given its close relationship with Israel, as you were suggesting, and yet, of course, also wanting to push for de-escalation.
Yes, on the one hand, we heard Minister Vadeful say that Germany stands on the side of Israel and supports its right to defend itself, to defend its right to exist and the security of its citizens. Vadeful also said that Iran's nuclear program is a big threat for countries in the region, but specifically for Israel, because of constant threats coming from Iran that threaten the mere existence of the state of Israel. But we've also heard him call for both countries to maintain calm. He said that both countries need to avoid an escalation because of the dire consequences that would have. But we know that this is a difficult balance for the German government to walk. We've heard that he wants to, as a German foreign minister, to contribute to negotiations to try to solve this escalation. He said there is no way that any further military engagement is going to bring a resolution to the conflicts in the region, and in particular, further escalations would even threaten the two-state solution. That is what the German government wishes to solve the situation between Israel and what is happening in Gaza, and just generally to guarantee the stability of the region of the Middle East.
That's DW's Giullia Saudelli reporting from Cairo. Giullia, thank you.